Earlier today, the Communications Minister Michelle Rowland did an interview with Ben Fordham on 2GB, where she, in promoting her Mis and Disinformation Bill, just simply peddled falsehoods, misinformation, and gaslit Ben Fordham's listeners. Just have a listen to some of the things that she said.
Okay, let me jump in with some quick questions, only because we've got 5 minutes. So who decides, who judges what is and isn't misinformation? If we could have short answers.
The platforms.
The platforms decide.
Now, I'm sorry, that is totally and utterly false.
They'll be making the decisions under your bill?
They currently already make these decisions. So
yeah, but under your legislation, it'll be left up to them?
They will continue to be doing that. The government does not have control over what these platforms decide to serve up.
I'm sorry, that is complete mis and disinformation. Quote what the minister said directly here. The government does not have control over what these platforms decide to serve up. That is utterly false. Let's just go through some of the provisions of the bill to show what the minister is saying is gaslighting the public and misleading Ben Fordham's listeners. Now, the first section in the bill to look at to show how the minister is misleading that the government doesn't have control of the platforms is section 1. Now, this provision in the bill here, let's go to section 1. Here we go. The simplified outline of this schedule. It says, and let's read it exactly word for word. It says, where there is no approved misinformation code in force. So the idea is that the platform set up this misinformation code according to the government guidelines. So where it's not in force, or an approved misinformation code that is in force is deficient, the ACMA, which is the Australian Media and Communications Authority, or eSafety Current, may determine a standard to provide adequate protection for the Australian community from serious harm, So it's ACMA that can determine what the standard is. This is simply all about where we have these platforms' community standards, enabling ACMA to write them according to what they believe is mis and disinformation. Now, this is all set out in further paragraphs. You've got to go to paragraphs. It's all in paragraph 57, 58 and 59, and they all say very similar things. Okay, I've got these sections here. 57 is about when ACMA may determine the standards. So ACMA writes the standards for the platforms, when they have a so-called total failure of the misinformation code. Section 58 is about a so-called partial failure of the misinformation code. And this is all decided by ACMA. And 59 is about so-called emerging circumstances. Now, all of those 3 sections of the Act give ACMA the ability to write the community standards that they enforce upon the platforms. So this is where the minister says the platforms get to decide. She's gaslighting the public. It is ACMA that gets to write these standards on behalf of the platforms and then enforce the platforms to follow these standards. And if they don't follow these standards and censor information that's so-called outside the standards, ACMA gets to fine them up to, as we said, $200 million or 5% of their, not Australian turnover, but global turnover. So just take, for example, section 58 here, where they say the so-called misinformation code or community standards, is they say it's a partial failure. Now, under section here 1C, it says ACMA is satisfied that the code is deficient. Okay, it's defined by subclause 6 of this Act. So we go down to subclause 6, and it says deficient to the extent to which it deals with a particular one of those matters, and if only in relation to that matter, the code is not operating to provide adequate protection for the Australian community from serious harm, or contributed by misinformation and disinformation on the platform. So ACMA rules that the community standards that the platform was written is not up to what ACMA believe it is, ACMA can force them to rewrite it. And that's what they've got here in Clause 3. So Section 58, Clause 3. It says ACMA may, by legislative instrument, determine a standard that applies to participants in that section of the digital platform industry and deals with a deficient matter or deficient matters. A standard under this subclause is to be known as a misinformation standard.
And under your legislation, it'll be left up to them?
They will continue to be doing that. The government does not have control over what these platforms decide to serve up.
So there you have it, straight from the bill itself, right? Clearly showing what the minister said at that discussion with Ben Fordham this morning, where she said the government does not have control over what the platforms decide to serve up, is completely and utterly false. It is ACMA that gets to write the community standards about what they believe is mis or disinformation, and then force the platforms to comply with it. And that would force the platforms are forced to delete anything that ACMA determines is mis or disinformation. That was a disgraceful interview this morning. As I said, the minister has gaslit and misled the public. And to just think, this is how sneaky and rotten the Albanese government is. You've got a minister going on to Sydney's leading breakfast radio station, out there to talk about a mis and disinformation bill, peddling mis and disinformation and gaslighting the people listening to it. This bill must be defeated. It is anti-democratic, it is un-Australian. It wouldn't see the light of day in the US because it would be against their constitution. Let's hope we can put some pressure, keep the pressure up. There are 4 senators left, 4 senators. Labor needs 3 of them to vote with the bill. Let's hope we can keep in the next couple of days, in the next week, keep the pressure up on those senators so they will realise what an affront to our democracy this bill is and how the Labor Party are again spinning and lying and deceiving and misleading, even to get through their mis and disinformation bill through Parliament.